Daniel Harper never thought a vacation could feel like a warning. The invitation came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Rachel stood in their kitchen, scrolling through cruise deals on her phone while dinner cooled on the stove. "Mom shouldn't travel alone right now," she said. "It's been hard since Dad passed. Come with us. It'll be good for all three of us." Daniel nodded even though something inside him hesitated. He and Rachel had barely spoken about anything real in months. Their talks were about bills, meetings, errands. Still, a cruise sounded like a chance to fix things. Margaret Collins arrived at the airport with one suitcase and a calm smile. She hugged Daniel politely, thanked him for coming, and said nothing else. He noticed how tired her eyes looked, even when she tried to seem cheerful. The ship towered over the port like a floating city. Music played as guests boarded. Rachel rushed ahead, excited, pointing at the decks and pools. Daniel followed with Margaret beside him, both quiet, watching people take photos and wave at the shore. That first evening, everything looked perfect. Soft lights reflected off the ocean. Waiters carried plates that smelled of butter and herbs. A violinist played near their table. Rachel's phone buzzed. She frowned. "Work. I have to take this." "I thought you were off," Daniel said. "I am, mostly. I'll be quick." She kissed his cheek and hurried away. Daniel sat back in his chair, feeling suddenly awkward. Margaret folded her napkin slowly. "Well," she said with a gentle laugh, "looks like it's just us." They ordered anyway. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable at first, just polite. They talked about the ship, the weather, the food. Margaret sipped her drink. "Rachel loves the ocean. Always has. She used to make me drive to the beach at sunrise," Daniel said, smiling faintly. Margaret studied him for a second. "Used to?" He realized what he'd said too late. "We're busy lately." She nodded, not pushing. Rachel didn't return for an hour. When she finally did, she apologized and rushed through her meal. Later, Daniel stood alone near the railing, watching the lights of the city fade behind the ship. The engines hummed low beneath his feet. Margaret stepped beside him. "First cruises are strange," she said. "Exciting, but lonely too." Daniel exhaled. "Yeah." The wind lifted her hair slightly. She tucked it back with careful fingers. "Thank you for coming," she added. "It means more than you know." He looked at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. "Your family," he said. She smiled, but her eyes lingered on the dark water longer than necessary. Somewhere deep inside Daniel, a quiet unease stirred. He didn't know why. He just knew this trip was already asking more of him than he expected. Even as the cruise settled into routine, Daniel felt the shift. Rachel was gone more than she was there. Every evening, a call, an urgent email, a sudden headache, something pulled her away, leaving Daniel and Margaret alone on the vast ship. At first, they simply shared small talk. Decks, meals, books they had read, the strange mix of strangers wandering past them in bright clothes. But slowly, the conversations deepened. Margaret spoke about her late husband, about quiet dinners and empty rooms. Daniel admitted how lonely he sometimes felt, how work and responsibility had dulled the laughter in his marriage. "You look tired," she said one afternoon as they walked past the pool. "Not just physically, mentally too." "I suppose I am," Daniel admitted. Margaret didn't push. She didn't offer advice. She simply walked beside him, her presence calm, steady. That quiet understanding was heavier than any words. Days passed, and the walks became longer. After dinner, when the ship glimmered under moonlight, they lingered on the upper deck. The ocean spread endlessly beneath them. A gentle wind tugged at Margaret's shawl. Daniel found himself noticing the small things, how she tucked stray hair behind her ear, the way her laugh softened the night air, the light in her eyes when she recalled a fond memory. One evening, rain forced the passengers inside. Daniel and Margaret huddled under a small overhang, watching droplets scatter across the deck. The world around them blurred, children running for cover, couples laughing with umbrellas, the horn of the ship low and distant. For the first time, silence wasn't empty. It was charged. Their eyes met, unspoken thoughts hovering between them. It wasn't desire yet, not exactly, but it was something dangerous. Recognition, connection, a longing neither wanted to admit. Margaret looked away first, adjusting her coat. "We should get inside," she said softly. Daniel nodded, heart racing, aware that this moment had changed something he couldn't put back. Evenings became this delicate balance. He wanted to speak, to confess his feelings, yet he knew it was wrong. She was Rachel's mother. He was Rachel's husband. But walking side by side, sharing laughter and small secrets, brought a warmth he hadn't realized he missed. One night, Margaret confided quietly, "I didn't expect to enjoy this trip as much as I have." Daniel smiled, a little tightly. "Neither did I." She glanced at him, her eyes searching. "You and Rachel, you deserve happiness." "And you?" he asked, careful. "I'm learning to be happy again," she said, but her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. Daniel felt it then, the pull of something forbidden, something tender. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself he was loyal, that Rachel was his life. Yet, each shared glance, each quiet word, added weight to a feeling he couldn't ignore. The cruise carried on, waves lapping against the ship's hull, the sun painting gold on the water. Daniel and Margaret walked together, laughed together, and stayed just close enough to feel a connection that should have stayed buried. And with every passing day, Daniel realized the hardest part wasn't Rachel's absence. It was the dangerous comfort of Margaret's presence, and how it was slowly pulling him into something he wasn't sure he could resist. The night of the formal dinner changed everything. Rachel stayed in their cabin with a headache, insisting Daniel and Margaret go without her. "It's fine," she said, dismissing his concern. "Enjoy the evening." Daniel hesitated in the cabin doorway, unsure if he should stay or go. Margaret smiled gently. "She'll be okay. Come on. Don't let the night go to waste." The ballroom was alive with music and chatter. Chandeliers cast soft light across the polished floors. Guests in elegant gowns and suits swirled around them. Daniel felt nervous, a tight knot in his stomach he couldn't explain. Margaret looked radiant, calm, effortless, and Daniel noticed the grace in every small gesture. They sat close, closer than usual, sharing jokes and laughter over candlelight. Margaret spoke about places she had traveled with her late husband, and Daniel told stories about Rachel's childhood, the little quirks he had learned to love. "You clean up well," Margaret teased, tilting her head. "And you," Daniel replied before he could stop himself. The words hung between them, warmer than a polite compliment, heavier than a casual remark. Later, the ballroom emptied, and they moved to the upper deck. Moonlight shimmered across the ocean, silver paths stretching to the horizon. The ship's engines thrummed beneath their feet, steady and constant. Margaret's shawl fluttered in the wind, and Daniel reached instinctively to adjust it. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. "I shouldn't be feeling this," Margaret said, voice low. "Me neither," Daniel admitted. Silence followed, filled with everything neither of them wanted to say. Neither acted, yet the closeness felt like walking a tightrope over a dark ocean. "I love my daughter," Margaret added suddenly. "I love my wife," Daniel said, almost instinctively. They both meant it. But love sometimes has a way of mixing with longing, with human weakness, with the unexpected warmth of shared vulnerability. That night, Daniel understood it. Something had shifted, quietly, dangerously. When Margaret finally stepped back, her eyes glistening, she whispered, "This can't happen again." Daniel nodded, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. It had already started. The mistake wasn't in words or touches, it was in letting himself care too deeply, letting a forbidden closeness grow without realizing how far it could go. They returned to their cabins, polite and composed, but the quiet tension followed him into the dark, the waves outside pounding like a reminder. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying each glance, each soft word, each accidental touch. He couldn't erase them. The cruise continued, but nothing felt the same. Margaret's presence lingered, comforting and dangerous at the same time. He tried to distract himself with conversation, with meals, with the horizon, but it was impossible. By the time the next day arrived, Daniel understood one simple truth: some lines are crossed in silence, in emotion, in the stolen moments that feel innocent until they're not. And he knew, deep down, that he and Margaret had already walked too close to the edge to turn back without scars. This night would stay with him forever. Not as an act, not as betrayal, but as a warning of what happens when hearts are fragile, loneliness is heavy, and temptation wears a gentle, smiling face. The final day of the cruise arrived with bright sunlight and a sense of endings. Daniel tried to keep himself busy, helping Margaret with luggage and sightseeing, keeping his distance, but the quiet tension between them was impossible to ignore. Each glance, each shared smile, carried the weight of the nights before. Rachel was cheerful that morning, fully recovered from her migraine. She chattered about souvenirs and the farewell show that evening. Daniel forced a smile, nodding, but inside he felt hollow. The memory of the moonlit night, the brushing of hands, the closeness he shouldn't have felt, lingered like a shadow. That evening, Rachel went ahead to the show, her excitement contagious. Daniel lingered near the stern, staring at the endless blue ocean, trying to clear his mind. Margaret approached quietly, her steps soft against the deck. "We can't pretend nothing happened," she said, her voice calm but firm. Daniel turned to face her. "There was nothing," he said quickly. "Nothing physical." "But emotionally?" she asked, her eyes searching his. He couldn't answer. The truth was heavier than any lie he could tell. They had shared feelings, moments, laughter, and attention that should have belonged only to their family bond. Margaret's eyes glistened. "I should never have leaned on you. I was lonely, and you were vulnerable. That doesn't excuse anything." Daniel's chest tightened. "I don't know how to go home after this," he admitted. "You go home," Margaret said gently, "and you love your wife fully. Forget me in that way, completely." He nodded, knowing she was right. The line had been crossed in thought, in closeness, in emotions that shouldn't have existed. But now he had to rebuild the walls he had let crumble. Rachel returned moments later, her arm linking through his. "Ready to pack tomorrow?" she asked, her smile bright, unaware of the storm that had quietly passed between them. Daniel looked at her, at the woman he had promised to love and honor. Guilt and relief collided in his chest. He realized how fragile happiness could be, how close he had come to losing everything that mattered. The farewell show ended, the ship docked, and the cruise concluded without incident. Passengers hugged, waved, and boarded buses back to reality. Daniel and Margaret exchanged one final, careful glance, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they had narrowly avoided. On the flight home, Daniel stared out the window at the clouds, thinking about the closeness, the conversations, the quiet tension of the last days. No one had been hurt physically, but the emotional brush had left a mark he would never forget. He returned to Rachel with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that love wasn't just about presence, it was about loyalty, attention, and remembering why he had chosen this life. Margaret had reminded him of what could happen when he strayed emotionally, even without crossing obvious boundaries. Some mistakes don't leave scars that the world sees. They leave memories that the heart carries quietly, a reminder of how fragile trust and love can be. Daniel knew he had been lucky to recognize the danger in time, lucky that Rachel's absence hadn't turned into permanent heartbreak, and lucky that Margaret had the grace to step back. As they drove home, the ocean disappearing behind them, Daniel felt a quiet, heavy relief. He had survived temptation, preserved his marriage, and learned something painful yet necessary about the fragility of desire, loyalty, and the weight of emotional closeness. The cruise was over, but its lessons would stay with him forever. Some mistakes don't leave visible marks, they live quietly inside, shaping the way you love and trust again.